Hello and welcome to my hand knitted Ganseys and my 11th final one. I'm so excited this morning. I'm up early in my craft room in my dressing gown, sorting out the dye lots of the wool which I accumulated a few years ago when Wendy wool stopped producing. So I bought up as much as I could after the owner in a knitting shop in Cromer told me this. I bought up, I think it was some red that he'd got in, and then did other colours. I've since knitted them up and have to be very careful not to mix the dye lots halfway through a sleeve, which I did on one of the sweaters. So I'm just getting all the things together and then I shall move on to the next stage. So bye for now. I was going to try and be as factual and succinct as possible and missed out on the bit before here in my craft room. Let's just do a scan round with all the different projects waiting lined up on the chest here. What I didn't say was that when I collected all the Wendy wool, it was from round the country on, I don't know whether I did I go on eBay or did I go on, and various places anyway had bits and bobs of different colours left. So I collected, and some had more than others. So as long as I had enough, say 5 to do the body and another couple to do the sleeves, then I was okay. It worked, apart from the first blue one where but actually if I just show that now, that gets that out of the way. There it is. So I don't even know if it will show up, but that sleeve of that blue one, yes, you can just see the line across it just there, where I joined a different dye lot in. But it's one of those things that if I hadn't pointed it out, and no one would notice. And that's become a bit of my mantra at the minute, that it's all part of being handmade. The little differences, and I won't call them mistakes, that something is handmade and not machine made, and it's got a history. In the case of each of these, a lot of them I did in lockdown, the 3 for the girls. We've got 200 hours of knitting, but the beauty of a Gansey, as indeed other sweaters, Icelandic sweaters which I've done, is that they are knit in the round, and so all the bit up to the armhole is done in knit. This is a false seam and can be done. Indeed, I tend to go all out when I have projects, and oh, now you see I'm rambling, and I wasn't going to ramble on this one. I did a lot of outdoor knitting one year as well, in places like Polperro, where they call them knit frocks, and I'll hope to include the photographs of the outdoor knitting that I did. And that was like, I'm trying to move it around so that I don't just point at the same thing the whole time while I'm rambling on. I was trying to knit in the places where the Fisher wives and daughters and women generally would be just knitting a Gansey in between times in their – well, lunch break and their chores. They would have an attachment on their waist to hold the one needle, and they would knit one-handed, and I've just been doing all the research downstairs. 200 stitches a minute. Anyway, that's enough for now, because I'm hoping to go through my notes and just tick off the sweaters one at a time and the points that I would like to say about it. But as with all my other crafting, it is in my head. It's not always proper, and it's just how I've made them and how I've read a lot of books and put together my own pattern. I'm just down in the basement, and I've sorted out some knitting books, specifically Gansey knitting books. I absolutely love reading knitting books as a hobby. I don't have to knit anything in it to enjoy a knitting book. So I have fished out. I'm going to quickly show you the ones that influenced me when I first decided to knit the first Gansey. So I'll just turn the camera around. So here's a pile of knitting books, and then you can see the ones at the back I've just opened at specific Gansey pages, and then these were the ones, smaller ones I bought specifically when I was into the actual Gansey phase. The traditional Dutch Ganseys goes back to the symposium I attended in Sheringham, Norfolk, by which time I had knit my first one. So by the time I attended that first how to knit Ganseys and all the display of Dutch ones, I was well into it. So I'm going to really try and not waffle on and do a little bit at a time and concentrate. So this Little Boy Blue was in the Woman's Weekly for a small boy. I knit it for one of the grandsons, and this was sometime pre-2017. Then we were on holiday in the Outlaws caravan in Norfolk, and my husband spotted there was going to be a symposium. Sheringham Museum were holding a symposium. It was in September, this was June, so I decided I'm not very good in groups and people at that time. I'm a bit better now probably than I was, but I'd managed the one day. I did regret not going to the 2 days because I so enjoyed the one day. I went on the Saturday. Well, I went to the reception on the Friday and went on the Saturday, by which time I'd already knitted my first Gansey, because once I get into something I get so excited, get carried away and do lots of research and go into it. So I'd gone out and bought some Wendy navy blue and a pattern. This was the pattern that I bought with it. But along the way, and it's funny because it does look a bit like my ones, but it's actually not at all. The side seams are open there, and the sleeves, instead of picking up round the arm, they're knitted in the traditional way. They're going up, and then they have to be stitched together as well as the side seams. The gusset, which you incorporate as you go along, I believe was done separately. The shoulder one, which I do use, is the same. The pattern, although it looks very similar, I did quite like the bars of this one, and so I adapted the bars. And then there was another pattern in my stash of knitting patterns. I know it's not a Gansey, but I'd knit for my husband actually a few years ago, and I liked the bands like that. So in the meantime, all the books downstairs I'd been accumulating. So I started off making my version of this one. So this is the first one, if I can come around here to the pile. So this was my first ever one, and whoops, I don't know if you can see. So I started off knitting it in two pieces, but then realised that I wanted to be knitting it in the round, so put the false seam in here and actually stitched up my seams there. I guess I only stitched one up. I don't know quite how I did put the false seam in actually, but it does look a bit of a mess. So same the other side. Then, right, I'm going to pause a minute now and move on to my refer to my notes and move on and carry on trying to be succinct. Why doesn't it show up as being navy in the light? It is very dark navy. Yeah, that's better. The other thing to just mention on this navy one was I did the first sleeve in double rib, finishing off. I incorporated, I could just say actually about the initials, there we go, upside down, LH. Traditionally the initials were incorporated in the body of the sweater, but because I'm LH and my husband's RH, and one of the subsequent ones, I think we were going to share, I quite like the idea of putting LH on being my left hand and him being right hand, and then you, although they're the same back and front, you would swap them over so as they don't get so much wear if you're a fisherman. But the other thing I'd say to remark about this, I think I'd left the initials coming down this last sleeve, and then in my excitement to finish off, I managed to do a single rib, cast off double, instead of the double rib. And when I wore this finished Gansey for the reception on the Friday night, and I'd written a little thing about my Gansey, well, my knitting really, just to take with me, which they were interested in. I don't know whether they were or not, but they're just being polite, which my husband printed off for me. And but got talking to like-minded knitters that were going to attend the course, and held out my two arms, and said, spot the deliberate mistake or something stupid. And out of a room full of knitters, no one noticed. And so, as I was just saying on the earlier little clip, unless you point out the differences, no one but you will be aware of them. And I just kept it. I could have pulled it and done it in double, but I actually quite like the memory of saying spot the deliberate mistake and no one being able to. The casting off double is another feature, and I was just going to briefly, since as I've mentioned the initials, traditionally, as I say, they were on the front. I think sometimes they were, I read a little bit about one being in the gusset, the initials. When you do pearl on knit, it sticks, well, got to get it the right way around, it sticks up, but if you do knit on pearl, it doesn't, I think is what I'm trying to say. One of the books that I've got downstairs has got sort of 2 pages of how to do knitting, and you could do like a delay stitch which comes out better, but in the end I think you can see that says LH, even though that bit is down and that bit is raised. RH was slightly more difficult because of the bump in the R, which I'll show in a minute. So that's enough of that one. Then followed the one for my husband, the navy one. So that's his RH, upside down. I think that was my second one. I was still at the stage doing the block pattern and then this 2x2 one. I think that one's called a seed stitch. I was going to say what all the different ones were. This one's still got to go in the freezer because actually on the video it's showing up as having little white bits on it, which my navy one's been in the freezer, as indeed has I think my blue one. So that's the second one to go there, but I shall speak about, I'll put that one on one side because I shall speak about that one again in a minute. And then we come to the 2 blue ones. This is the one I'd previously said where I'd used different colour, and looking at it, different dye lot, looking at it, the one sleeve and half of the other sleeve are actually noticeably different colour to the body and half that sleeve. So I don't know, yeah, you can sort of see the different colour there, starting there, different colour, and there. So what was I doing here? By this time I couldn't concentrate on the 2x2, so I was doing the 4x4 there and then doing this other pattern, which from memory I think it was every so many rows had pearl all the way, no, extra pearl stitches in. And I was looking at all the representations about all what these bit means, and I really just chose ones that I thought I could do at the time, and then it just became my signature one, if you like. So those were the cables. They were all sea related. Apparently the diamond, and there was only supposed to be one of them I was just reading earlier, is the Eye of God, which was supposed to help save the seamen in times of distress on the sea. And these ones like this were the waves marks in the sand. And what I would do is, when I got to the top bit, because my husband's a lot, I don't know if I just said, a lot slimmer than I am. Once I'd done one, I'd already worked out the different blocks along here, sort of divided up the stitches, decided how many rows I was going to do. Oh, and the other thing, while I'm talking about patterns, is that you need a knit row. I don't know if I'd got to that at this stage. A knit row in between these ones going this way to distinguish the pattern. And ditto here, but I'm going to go through in a bit more detail. I'm just sort of doing the individual sweaters. So that was that blue one, which I've finished with, and then this was the second blue one. For me, that's a wider one, and that's the one that's already been washed and been in the freezer. And I think nothing else to say about that one. Before I finish off and run through all the different stages of the Gansey, and then finally finish off with what I'm calling Guernseys, I'm just going to put a few random points in and just refer to my notes, because as I said, I'm trying to be organised. So this is the girls' Ganseys. The oldest daughter chose the wool that she would like, and as the Wendy was no longer available, we went for the frangipani, and she, much more organised than me, sent off for the swatches. I'm just looking at it actually, from memory. I think it was the, oh, actually I probably got it here in my bags. So let's say what colour it is. These bags, oh, there it is. So which colour is it? Oh, it is that darker one. Ocean Deep, that's right. Ocean Deep. And they came in a cone. I don't know if you can see it with the other bit of the blue in there. So the three girls ones that I knitted during lockdown, and it was funny, we used to, when we were allowed, we used to sit out with our neighbour at the front of the house, 2 metres apart, having, he'd bring his coffee cup round and we'd sort of pour the coffee from a height, because in those times we didn't know how the virus was spreading. And then later on we weren't allowed. But he didn't realise I'd, in the mornings when we were sat outside in the front yard having coffee, that I'd knitted 3. And he did say to me, you know, when are you going to finish that sweater? And I said, actually, it's the 3rd one. Because they were all the same colour, and the 2 girls are the same size. I think I knit them all the same size, because the difference was negligible. So that was that bit of extra info. And when I couldn't find the pattern that started all off, the Women's Weekly Boy Blue that I'd knit for one of the grandsons, I mean, they're all either teenagers or in their 20s now. So I think it was probably about 10 years ago I did the Boy Blue. I'd just been searching through all my old patterns in very organised, but in different parts of the house, couldn't find it, and it was behind a knitted snow dog cut out. But I found this. This was my spinning and weaving days, but then I was into K Facet, and I'd kept this. I keep everything. I mean, I've kept all the receipts of all the wool, and I look and think, why have I kept that? I've also kept labels, but this was Stratford-upon-Avon, Civic Hall, 4th of April, 1989. That was my ticket. I haven't worked out yet how you actually take photographs on and put it on his site. I know I've tried to, but the K Facet Studio one, you can only read the posts on Facebook. So that's another, all this is still a bit of a learning curve, and I have to concentrate. Right, so that's that and that's that. Oh, don't know if I can just bring this round and show this basket. I was just going to say about the baskets. We had a guest house in Stratford-on-Avon, and one year, this was in the, oh, my husband's not here and he's very good at remembering dates, but I think it was in the 80s. 80s? When did I do that one? Yeah, probably it was the 80s. There was at the NEC, a big exhibition centre in Birmingham, not a long way from Stratford. People would stay in Stratford because there were a lot of, because of the Shakespeare connection, there were a lot of guest houses, hotels. And this gentleman had come over, it was a food one, and he'd bought a basket of food. He was, and I've been trying to think where he was from. It was somewhere in Africa, and this basket originally contained a fruit and other food that he'd brought over for his stall. And at the end of the few days, he bequeathed me the basket, very proudly bequeathed me the basket and the fruit and the rest of the produce in it that was okay. I think it was a guava. Is there a guava fruit? I remember there was a sort of large fruit that I'd never seen before, and I didn't know what to do with it. But this basket is fairly. He said it was made in the place where he was from, but the wicker is almost like wood. It's very. It's not like the wicker of the one I'm going to show you in a minute. And although it's got nice memories of this lovely gentleman presenting me with this, and it's had hats and gloves in and things over the years, but it has a way of, I feel a bit like Sleeping Beauty. On occasion when I got it down from the hall shelf, I've ended up with a sort of little splinter in my finger, and yet it's all natural things. I thought it was almost as though there was a bit of wire, but I've looked at these and they're all natural hessian that it's attached together with. It's lasted very well. The other basket that I keep knitting in that I wanted to show was my mother-in-law's shopping basket. It's a round wicker one. Again, it's lasted amazingly well because she was born 1900. She was, because my husband was the youngest of 6 and he's older than me, she was the same age and generation as my grandmother. But I absolutely adored her. I was so lucky. And I think possibly because she was that bit older, as a sort of 20-year-old newlywed, I didn't mind her coming round and telling me I shouldn't be using the tumble dryer for the terry nappies and should be pegging them on the line because it was a good drying day. And I suppose there was a bit of, I used to sort of humour her, and I would never have dreamt of saying, oh, well, we don't do it like that anymore. But funnily enough, I've turned circle now, and whenever possible, dry the washing on the line, because my sister had this thing that if you put it out on the line just for a few minutes, on even not a good drying day, as long as it's not raining, that it will dry quicker inside. And I've certainly never had problems with drying washing. The other thing I was going to quickly say about my mother-in-law was when we first got married, she said, call me Hilda. And I couldn't quite, it wasn't really done in those days to call that generation by their Christian names. I didn't really know what to call her. So I was quite glad when the grandchildren, I think I went for years without actually saying a name to her. Well, it wasn't very long, because when we had the children, of course, then their nicknames were Jaja, which was one of the older cousins, well, siblings' children, that would have been our children's cousins, first attempts for saying granny and granddad, I presume. Our children ended up calling my mum Gangan, which coincidentally was what Queen Victoria's grandchildren called her, and I believe the late Queen, I did read, they called her Gangan as well. My mum always think with the name Jaja and Gaffer instead of Granny and Grandad on my husband's side. I always think of my mum saying, one day she sort of called me in the kitchen and she said, why am I not allowed to say moo cows and bar lambs to your children when you've got such silly nicknames for all their relatives? I think that was when we did Christener Gangan, not knowing that it was from Queen Victoria. Only discovered that, I think, going to Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, that suddenly discovered that Queen Victoria's grandchildren called her Gangan, and then read recently say that the late Queen's did as well. So that's the in between bit. I think I've covered all those. I'm just going to have a quick refer to my notes and get back 1 minute, because I do really want to get this out today. Right, we're through to the final bit. There are lots of, when you start looking into Ganseys and the history of Ganseys, there's a lot of information out there. Most of it similar, some of it a bit contradictory, about the different patterns being for the particular village that the fishermen came from. So as if they got lost at sea, they could be identified by their sweater. And then also the sort of bit of controversy about Ganseys and Ganseys. A Guernsey was actually an undergarment, and Ganseys was a Scottish name for all sweaters, but then became the name for fishermen's sweaters. I remember having a bit of a discussion with an elderly lady on the pier at Crowber for one of the vintage weekends, because she said to me, why are you calling them Guernseys? Why are you calling them Ganseys when they're Guernseys? And she wasn't having it anyway, even though there are plaques on Sheringham Wall and quite clearly says Ganseys there. So I'm just going to run through the final bit now, and this is me and what I do. It's not it's not by any means a pattern. It's just the history for posterity about what I do. So I have just the final one, which isn't going to have the pattern on, and then therefore I am calling it a Guernsey, like the two that I'll just show you right at the end, the two that I've previously made. So I hope this is going to work. So the bottom bit, which I've just started in the navy blue that I had left, and I say it's going to be a plain one for my husband. It was supposed to be sort of more of a lighter weight one than the winter ones that he wears all the time when it's cold. So you start off anyway at the bottom. I don't do the proper casting on that you can read about in books that's like a picot edge, and I think is traditional, but I do make sure I do how I've always just knit. I have tried to teach myself different. I do hold the wool differently now over my fingers, and I can knit at approximately 40 stitches a minute if I'm hurrying and timing myself, but generally I'm doing it quite fast, but I can do it, say, just sitting, doing something else and just knitting. I just love to have a bit of knitting on the go, watching TV, on a car journey, whatever. So I'm looking forward to this final one. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so to start with, I'm going to do, and I'm making notes as I've done, because it is really all in my head, and once I've done one, I'm basically copying the navy blue one with the pattern on, because it's for my husband. But actually I did make a note to say that if I was knitting one for somebody different, if I saw them, that would be fine, I could measure them up. But if, like with the eldest daughter, I just asked her for the measurement for how long she wanted it up to her shoulder, and then from the cuff back to the neck here. And as it's without shaping, all in one piece, that I can make the garment. I just adapt one of the ones that I have already knitted and just add a chunk more on it. And then when it came to the pattern, I'd then have to do a bit of maths to work out how many groups of 4. I think it had to be divisible by 4. It's a bit like this one here I was starting on this morning, that I started on. It was 136 stitches, and I'm going to do 14 rows of knit on my 80 centimetre circular needle and the 100 one. When I've done that, I'm going to cast on 6 stitches here, and that is because I like the double ribbing bit to go on up the false seam, which isn't showing up very well. The false seam is 2 with a purl either side of it, so that's 2. Have I said that right? That one's only 1, and it doesn't match up. That one's only 1. The one I was basing it on, I must change my mind. The one I was basing it on, I didn't want to use the navy one because it's not showing up awfully well on the as the colour. It seems to go a bit grey. But the one I was basing it on had got two knits with a purl either side, one purl either side of it, so it looks like that on the back, and creates this false seam. And then I like it to join in with this bit of ribbing, double ribbing, so there's probably about 10 stitches there. So I will cast on the 6 stitches and then put it all on my 100 centimetre needle, and then go round and round and round for a month or something. But I'll have the knitting in my lovely Indian bag to just take with me wherever and just do a bit of mindless knitting. So there we go. And I've got enough of this 502 navy in the dye lot B to do the whole of the front up to when I put the bar on under the armpits. So, but the first thing then, that I'm just going to ditch that one and try and show on the blue again, although I didn't realise I was only doing a single. There's only 3 in that false seam, but never mind. So then at this point you start to include the gusset. So you're just like you knit a square anyway, stitch there and then increasing up each side. I've tried different ways, and I like the gusset to be as neat as possible. And I find slip 1 past slip stitch over when you come to the decreasing bit doesn't always work. And then there was another one where you were twisting it round, but it was a bit more fiddly. So I would probably just do, for the increasing these days, just do knit 1 first. Keep the false seam going, but knit 1 and then increase into the back of it, knit to the other side, increase into the back of it, and then knit 1. So there was the same gap and the little ridge all the way round the increasey bit. I think I only, looking at this one and the first one I did, I increased too rapidly and made the gusset stand out too much, because that's actually quite a good one for me. It lays quite flat. I think I've increased probably every 3rd or 4th row coming up here to this point here. So you're still knitting round and round and round. Then at this stage
what stage? Not till I get to the corner bit of the gusset. I don't do anything different, but I will then start after about, what's that, 2 inches of gusset. I then start the bars. And so that's just doing 2 purl rows, 2 knit rows in between, and then 2 purl rows. And then I started on this 4x4. And as I did say earlier, these all have different symbols, fishing related symbols, sand, cables. I don't think I said earlier, and I've just seen it in my notes, this bit was a ladder bit, and then the cable bits represent ropes. And I did say about the diamond being the eye of God or something. So then I've sort of made up in multiples of 4, I think. Yeah, it would have to be 4, wouldn't it? Because of the changeover in this 4x4 to make the blocks meet at the edge. But you can work that into, I think I have been known to sort of, if I'm a stitch short or something, increase to make it so as it does neatly finish at the side here. So then you go on to knitting backwards and forwards on this bit now to the, oops, I could do with being a bit higher. Oh, hang on, can I just pop that? So here, when you get to the pointy bit of the gusset, you leave the gusset on a stitch holder because it's at its fattest point. Leave that on a stitch holder, and then you just go backwards and forwards along here. And then I like to finish off, and really a lot of the books will tell you different patterns, they'll do graphs and everything. But for me, I just did ones that I could cope with. It was a few years, I remember, since I'd done sort of an Aran sweater and cables. And I just got a little cable needle and just had to remember to put it to the back or the front. And then again, trying to get this so as the ladder bit has got the same space here and here. So, and again with the diamonds, just trying to increase, and perhaps if need be, have an extra row in there. And then finish off with the cable lines this way, the bars this way. And then you do the same. Let me think what you do. You leave these stitches then on one needle from there to there. They will be on needle, and then you'll go back and do the back exactly the same until you've got 2 lots on needles. So then you want to start and then again, traditionally there are different ways of doing the shoulder gusset. I did see one in the Beth. I was going to say Tweddle, but that she's the sports person, Beth Kirsch, something or other, the book. Anyway, she's got one where there's like different traditional ways of doing the neck. And actually, when we lived in Devon, we had a Dutch friend next door, but one, his mother had hand spun and hand knit a Gansey, quite thick wool, and he never liked this neckline, and he did ask me to unpull it and just put him a rolled neck on it, which I did. It did seem a bit of a shame afterwards when I got into it, but I don't know, I suppose because it's wool, the fishermen would wear, this would be the only garment they would wear, and they'd wear like a silk cravat-y neckerchief thing under it if it rubbed around the neck. They'd just wear it. We went on a talk once about a mariner in a submarine, and he said they just wore their clothes day and night, and then when they got back to shore, their wife would put them in a bath with a whole bottle of washing up liquid and soak the clothes because they'd be able to stand up. But I suppose something like wool anyway has natural properties, and you don't need to keep washing it because obviously it's wet when it's wet, it's warm, and obviously living on the sheep's back, it still retains all the properties. Anyway, sorry, I digress. You get to the neck, and then there's a way. I would have to refer to my notes for this one, but I do quite like the way that this is joined up, leaving, again, 20 stitches to do the neck gusset there. So you join that panel up there, and you just put one from one needle, one from the other needle, cast it off, and then when you've got two on a third needle, unless you can do it on two needles, I think I did try once, it was less fiddly than trying to manage three needles, and just go put one over the other. So keep taking one from one, casting off, and then doing the stitch over. It leaves quite a nice bump that does look like the bars the other way. I mean, there is a slight difference, but that looks quite good. In my notes, apparently, the Scottish knitters used to say, "Why sew when you can knit?" And I do agree with that, because in my early knitting days, one thing I just didn't like and never really got on with and was never particularly happy with was stitching up afterwards, whether you did it from the front to the back or whether you did a sort of slip stitchy thing. These days, of course, with YouTube and Pinterest and everything, you can teach yourself how to do a very neat seam sewing, I suppose. But that's why my knitting these days just doesn't have any sewing together. Yes, I knit it together. So you cast off and then leave, seem to remember something about leaving 20 stitches. And then when you get to this point, you're then picking up, you're making a neck gusset thing. I'm trying to think how I can show. So you're picking up one stitch from each side again and increasing at the beginning of every row. So you pick up one stitch from here, increase, knit across, pick up one stitch, turn back, increase, knit across, pick up stitch, knit across, pick up stitch, and increasing as you're going along until you get this nice little gusset. I think it doesn't look a 20 stitch one actually, but for some reason I had it in my head that you did that. Well, perhaps there are 20 stitches there, they're quite little. Then you do the same, obviously, the other side, and then finally you have your neck stitches on. And again, it's got to be divisible by 4, because then you just go round. I don't change to a finer needle. I'm doing it all on a 3mm needle, and I wouldn't for this. I think I have done for the cuffs sometimes, but not always, change to a 2¼ needle. I don't know what that is in old needles. But because I want this to be quite loose, and I do knit loose, I leave it on the 3mm needle to just do only a little ribby bit. I think there's only probably about 10 rows there. And then it looks like on this one I have cast off double again. I did wonder on the one I'd started today whether I should have cast on double, because some of the wool looked a bit thin. I don't know whether it's because it's been around for a while. So then you've got sort of gilet resembled garment you've got your stitches on a needle holder here for your gusset. So you're going to start here at the point here, and then round this armhole here you're going to pick up, and from memory I think it was 200 all the way round. Well, that does sound rather a lot. but I think that was on the one for me. I will check, and I'm, say, larger than my husband, but again, making sure you do it as evenly as possible. And I have been known, although generally I don't approve of pulling work undone, I have been known to try and divide it into chunks. If it was 200, that'd be 100 each side, so 50 to that point. And say 25 to a quarter, so try and do 25, 25, 25 and 25, and then going back down the other way never seems quite as bad once you've got the 100 to the top point. Then you start knitting the sleeve downwards, obviously on these stitches you've got. So on this one, do the bars first. You can see the sun's just deciding to shine very brightly. At the same time, you are decreasing the gusset until, and still keeping your false seam around the sides. Slightly fiddly until you get going. I was quite relieved to see the back of the gusset at that point. So decreasing down there, keeping the false seam going. And then once you've done this bit of, I suppose is that sort of the saddle of the garment, really. It's sort of a overhanging sleeve, isn't it? Then once you've done the bar here, I then decrease down either side of the, oops, didn't think the sun was going to be so bothersome, either side of the false seam every fourth row. On this sweater, probably left it till last, I did put initials on just before I got to the cuff bit. They're not awfully long sleeves because so much of it hangs over. Traditionally the Gansey wasn't long in the body either. They finished at the waist, but all the ones that I've knitted don't finish at the waist. They sort of cover your bottom. And so then at that point you then, I think I did swap to the 2 1/4 needles and just do the double rib, 2x2 rib, whatever it's called, knit 2 purl 2, and then cast off using a double thread loosely, and as I knit loosely, I do everything loosely, so I don't have to remember to cast on or cast off tightly, because I don't. So it's actually quite simple, really. And as I say, once I've done one, all I need to do is just refresh myself. But I did get to the point where it's a bit like holidays, really. I always think with holidays, you should be enjoying yourself. And what's the point? If you go on holiday and, I don't know, you've got to do something that you're not particularly looking forward to, or it's going to be a bit of an ordeal, just do something you like. So I do really have enjoyed knitting all these, but then I got to the point where I was having to concentrate too much on the pattern bit, and I'd still got the cream and the red wool left. So then I decided, and I never thought it, but I have actually loved both my red and my cream one. Which I do first, the cream one, and worn it, obviously not all the hot summer we've had, but I have worn it sort of over summer dress, and they are wearable because they're wool. They're warm, but they can be cool as well, because they're so breathable, and they're just a lovely garment to wear. But I cut the pattern out, apart from, it's still got all the features in it, and I did still do the bars in it, but I just did plain knitting in between. So basically I started off the same, put the false seams in the same, did it round and round and round to the armpits, well, just below the armpits where I started the gusset. Then instead of putting the bars in on this bit, I just did, which I'd seen on a commercial Guernsey sweater I'd got. I think I did the red one differently because I think I did it wider, because I was a bit worried. Did I do it wider or did I unpick this one? But anyway, looking down, it's got 2, 2 and 2. So it's got like just a rib effect there. So when I'm doing going backwards and forwards here, knitting and purling on the front, I've just got to remember to just do this bit. And I did remember to. And then I put the bars on the top. How many did I put? I put 1, 2, 3 bars on. I don't know. I think I'm going to have to stop and put the line down. Hold on a minute. Right, I think that's a bit better. So where did I got to? So I did the bars at the top, did the shoulder in the same way, put the shoulder gusset on the one side, did the bars, did the casty off bit the same, put the shoulder gusset in there, did the neck rib, picked up around the sleeve, finished off decreasing the gusset, and then again, I don't know, you see, because is that any better? I'm getting, what am I getting? I think I should have moved where I sat, but I think you can just about see the 2 bars, decreased down the sleeve, didn't put any initials on these, did the rib and cast off double. That looks quite a neat cast off for me. I don't know why it looked neater. Usually it was a bit bulky when you cast off. So that was the cream one. And then finally the red one. Apparently wasps don't see red. So I was reading just recently. So I've been wearing my red sea salt dress when I've been sat outside doing things. And this goes brilliantly with it in the evenings if it gets a bit cool. So I never did actually think, I was trying to offer this last red wool to, I think my niece who does a lot of knitting, but she didn't have it. And then I thought, oh, actually I've started to wear a bit more red. So yeah, I was quite pleased with that one. So that was it. I thought there was something else I was just going to add on the end, but it was probably just to say there are lots of different variations on a theme, and this is just how I've done what will be my 11th one. I'm going to try and find as many photographs as I can just to pop on the end, which will be of, from memory, there's one of the girls, or perhaps I've got all of the girls wearing their ocean deep ones. I don't know, eldest daughter got some labels for me. I'd written on with an indelible pen, hand wash only. I do spin them in the washing machine, but I do always hand wash them. I'm not sure though whether ones that have knit for other people have survived, because I'm always a bit worried they'll just whack it in the washing machine and felt it, in which case I would have it back and do something with the felt. It would make wonderful felt. but that's why, really, I think myself and my husband have ended up with so many, because I just knit them. But after this last navy one, and I think it's probably not, well, we're not, well, we're just coming into autumn, so there'll be plenty of daylight to knit. But I did find with the navy ones that knitting navy in the dark isn't ideal. And it did hurt my eyes a bit. So this may be quite a long time in the making. And it is sort of getting rid of this stashes of wool I've had hanging around for a lot. So unless I buy any more, even the frangipani stockist that I used wasn't doing it anymore, but another lady had taken over. And so I did manage, when I needed to re-knit the sleeve of one of the daughters' Ganseys. I can't remember what happened. I think she lent it to me. I was going to do this video ages ago. She lent it to me. And we do have a moth and spider problem. I'm never quite sure whether it's the spider's eggs or the moth's eggs. I've mentioned it before anyway in videos, but it did get a moth hole on it. And I'd been looking at YouTube's and how to do invisible mending and couldn't get my head around it, and attempted it and made such a mess of it that I ended up deciding I was going to unpull the sleeve. It was fortunately on the sleeve, about halfway up by the elbow. So I unpulled it and re-knitted it. And for some reason, I was right out of wool, because I'd knit some Ganseys socks for the daughter to match, and I've knit headbands as well to match the I don't know whether I got some photographs of that. Anyway, all good fun, and I don't know if it's helped anyone in their Gansey knitting. It's good fun. And I think I did mention, I think I said something about it was the Herring Girls, their lunch break, and I thought afterwards, don't be silly, they wouldn't have had a lunch break. They were just sort of working all the time. But there's a lot of lovely pictures, and there are various sculptures or statues in, I was trying to think of the place in Scotland where there's one, but definitely in Polperro. There's a picture of I think that's is it a bronze statue or something, and I tried to sit in the same spot. One time we were taking some friends down to Polperro. We used to go there quite a lot when we lived in Devon, popped into Cornwall. It was one of our favourite places. And it was the year I was doing my outside knitting. And I was passenger in the front of the car. My husband was driving, they were sat in the back. And then we stopped on the A38 to see, there's a plane down there. I called it a Lancaster, but apparently it's a Lightning. And as we got out, I was just on a difficult bit, and I dropped a stitch, and it wasn't on a plain knitting bit, and I tried to pick it back up. And I remember this friend was sort of getting cross with me because I wasn't getting out of the car to admire this plain part, which I'd seen lots of times anyway, and I was more bothered about my dropped stitch. So that was another funny memory. And I remember sitting in a Hope Cove, a lovely seaside place near where we used to live, and doing some outside knitting. And it's funny doing outside knitting. Sometimes it does result in lovely conversations with random strangers, and then other times people just look at you and say, what on earth are you doing? So but I like I suppose really, perhaps it's being a bit I don't know, I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but the Herring Girls, they had to do the knitting. Oh, that was the other thing I'd seen in my notes, which I haven't added at any stage, was that when a couple got married, the intended bride would knit the husband a Gansey, which he would wear for the wedding very proudly, and then that would be his Sunday best. I can't remember at what time that would get put to be an everyday one, and then another one would be knitted for Sunday best. And another interesting bit I was reading, and I thought, well, that validates, the blue one with the different coloured dye lots on it. But apparently, as they were work garments primarily, the sleeves could be all different threads, all different sort of patches, and certainly the children's ones were knitted from all the just different bits of wool and everything. I think some of them were done as commissions, and so then I suppose anything that was left was, they used for their own use. And I did want to just say, and I still can't remember what the belt is called, and I have tried to get one because that fascinates me as well, the belt they would use to hold the one needle in while, and of course they wouldn't have circular needles in those days, they would have double pointed ones. I think probably only 5, but I remember again when I was looking around the exhibition at Ganseys in Sheringham, getting into not quite an argument, but this person who professed to be a non-knitter was trying to tell me they had 15 needles. And I realised afterwards she'd just been reading the blurb around it, and actually they were number 15 needles. They wouldn't have had as many as 15. You couldn't control that. But I think they probably had 5, about a foot long double pointed needles. But then the one would be tucked in this belt, and they'd be knitting away, and they could knit 200 stitches a minute. I think I said a bit earlier, I when I've timed myself can get up to 40, but the continental knitting is a lot quicker than traditional way English knitting, I suppose, that I was taught. But to knit faster, you need to, when I first started knitting, age 7, I used to hold the wool sort of like this, and then sometime, or a lot later on, probably when I learnt to crochet sort of a bit older, I now hold it over. But if you do the knitting very near to the pointy bits, you can get up quite a speed. I have trouble concentrating on doing more than one thing at a time when I'm videoing it anyway. But and I'm starting to waffle, and I was trying to keep this short, concise, and only about Ganseys and knitting. Well, I think I'm done. I think I've got a little thing of notes here, and I've just said about the wedding present ones. I think I just about included all the points, difference between, yes. Oh, another thing that sort of makes me smile is, and I think on some of the comments, thank you very much, by the way, I do really, it's been lovely making these videos, and I really enjoy, I'm not ever going to be famous, but I really do enjoy and really love, thank you very much, the comments people have put, like, keep smiling, or just nice little remarks from like-minded people. It's wonderful. What was I just going to say there? That put me in mind of something. Oh yeah, one of the books said what you sort of should be doing before you start a garment. You're supposed to knit a little sampler first, and especially with and then scale it up, especially with something, I don't know, like a Gansey that's got a pattern in. But really, it's not that complicated, and once you've knit one, you sort of know what you're doing and you adapt it. And then, like I've just discovered, sort of going through them, some I've done one thing with the seam and another, and certainly the gussets I think are all different under the armpits, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, if it's helped anyone or inspired anyone, I would say, yeah, knit a Gansey. It's good fun. And if you enjoy knitting, it is a way of just doing plain knitting, endless plain knitting, and then with the pattern ones, just, yeah, a bit of variety in the pattern, back to the plain knitting. And in the case of the last two Ganseys, nearly all plain knitting, and a wonderful garment at the end of it. Anyway, bye for now. Before I go over, try to keep it under a certain time. Bye for now. And thank you to anyone who's got this far. And thank you for listening.